Hello, welcome to your plank tutorial. Today's tutorial is narrated by myself, Melissa Wolf, owner and Pilates instructor of Goldline Pilates in Pasadena, California, and demonstrated by Eric Hager, Pilates and gyrotonic instructor also at Goldline Pilates. Today, you'll notice that we are not in the studio where we can often be found, but we are outside following CDC guidelines 6 feet apart. And it's a lovely day in Highland Park. So the purpose of this video is to assist you to be successful in the upcoming plank challenge so that you can impress your friends and achieve the many physical benefits surrounding the execution of a strong plank and to minimize injury. So what we'll do is we'll set up the groundwork of a solid and effective plank. Bird dog is an excellent introductory exercise that is appropriate for almost all practitioners. You should avoid this exercise if you have shoulder injuries or chronic shoulder pain, but bird dog can be recommended for recovery from back pain or back injury. First, what we'll do is we'll set up the position called 4-point kneeling. We're coming to your hands and to your knees. First off, if your kneecaps are feeling uncomfortable, go ahead and just double up your yoga mat underneath your kneecaps. Super, just so that you have some squishiness underneath you, or you can find something squishy to place underneath your kneecaps so that you have a little more cushion on those bony kneecaps. Just make sure that your cushion is a little bit even so that you're not feeling wobbly from side to side. Next, uncomfortable wrists in this position are fairly common, and sometimes it just takes a bit of getting used to. In the meantime, take a lot of breaks to rest your wrists, shake out your hands, and perform some gentle stretches to alleviate some of that tension. Honestly, proper form, lots of practice, and increased core strength are the best ways to combat wrist discomfort. But if your wrists are really feeling painful, one option that you have is to come up onto your wrists. Now, some people enjoy this and some people can't stand it at all, so give it a try and see what you think. What's important about coming up on your fists is to make sure that you're not breaking at the wrist. So make sure you're not rocking forward or rocking backwards or going from side to side. Another option you have is to use a set of barbells or dumbbells so that you have some support. So it's as if your knuckles are going down to the floor, but really they don't quite reach it. Again, in this position, make sure you're not breaking at the wrist. You want to make sure those knuckles are pointing down towards the floor and are nice and flat. Your last wrist option is to try to prop up the heel of your hands so they are slightly higher than your fingers. This way, the angle at your wrist is larger than 90 degrees, and sometimes that will give you some relief. Terrific. So now let's come to your hands and knees and set up the true four-legged table. The first thing that we'll check is that your shoulders are directly above your wrists and that your hips are directly above your knees. Occasionally, you may need to walk your knees a little closer or farther away from your hands. Your ankles can be pointed or flexed, whatever feels the most comfortable on your feet, ankles, calves, and shins. The most important thing to remember here is that you are aspiring to be a four-legged table, so distribute that body weight evenly between all four legs of your four-legged table. Sometimes your brain might be telling you to rely too much on upper body strength to maintain this position. Make sure, but your legs are strong, so make sure they're doing their fair share. This will be especially true when we progress onto the full planks later in this video. Now that we've set the legs of the table, let's set up the actual table. First, let's think about head placement. You might think that looking forward with your head a little higher might help to keep you up. But all of the upper body muscles will fire more efficiently if we bring your eye line down to the floor and a little bit in front of you. Additionally, we're going to avoid tucking your chin too close to your chest, and instead, we're going to pretend that there's a string tied to your crown, and I am pulling that string forward to seemingly elongate your neck. At the same time, Eric will rooster neck his chin in towards the ceiling as if he's trying to maximize a double chin underneath him. It's as if he's working to flatten all of the wrinkles on the back of his neck. Next, we'll look at Eric's shoulders. First, we'll make sure that the shoulders are not scrunched up towards your ears. Think about drawing the shoulders down away from your ears by setting your shoulder blades down towards your back pockets and gently squeezing the muscles in your armpits down towards your hips. Let's try to combine that motion with setting your head and neck like we talked about in the previous step. Next, let's practice squeezing your shoulder blades together behind you, and notice how your chest, or your sternum really, drops slightly towards the floor. Now, let's pull your shoulder blades away from each other, and you'll notice your chest is a bit sunken in, and your upper back is a bit rounded. Now, we're going to try to exactly split the difference between those two positions so that your collarbone is widened and your upper back also feels lengthened. Imagine a string tied to each shoulder being pulled in opposite directions. Third, let's set up Eric's arms. First off, Eric will be tempted to lock out his elbows, but that's just turning your arm into a kickstand instead of using the muscles for actual support. We'll ask him to just soften the elbows slightly, and sometimes it's not really even a perceptible difference unless you happen to have super double jointed elbows. Next, Eric will slightly rotate his elbows backwards, so it's as if the inside of his arm comes a little closer to his torso. And last, he will set through the shoulders as we've already discussed to get the sense that he's pushing the floor away from him rather than crushing body weight down onto his wrists. Fourth, we'll look at Eric's ribs. Gravity is heavy, and as such, Eric's ribs feel like drooping down. Usually, drooping ribs is combined with an excessive pinching together of the shoulder blades behind you. Eric is going to shift his ribs towards the ceiling as if balancing a teacup between his shoulder blades. Fifth, we're going to talk about Eric's lumbar and pelvis and place that in the perfect position. In this position, it's very easy to tuck your tailbone under. It is our recommendation that you approach this exercise with your tailbone slightly tipped out so that your natural lumbar curve is present. We don't want to excessively arch the lumbar, but for many people, tipping your tailbone out even slightly will feel like an arched lower back. You can see that Eric has a naturally pronounced lumbar curve, so your flat back may not look exactly like this. But what we want to avoid is tucking your butt under, which will excessively flatten the lumbar. You can see when we set up all of these components that they are all interconnected. For instance, if your upper back is too rounded because your shoulder blades are set too far apart, your tailbone feels compelled to tuck under. If your lumbar is excessively arched and you've placed your tailbone too high in the air, then your ribs tend to droop as a response. If you rock too much body weight into your arms, your shoulders will feel compelled to elevate towards your ears. So the point is to aspire to perfect placement in each area. We're going to split the difference and do the best that we can. Last, let's talk about the abdominal wall. Oftentimes, when we talk about ab work or core work, people like to tense up and brace for impact, as if I'm just going to run over and punch you in the stomach. But we don't want that at all. We want those muscles to be strong, but flexible and dynamic, not stiff and rigid. Core muscles support and move and articulate the spine. We want them to be fluid and capable of moving in all directions. Now, let's get into that perfect setup. We'll add some of this movement. First, we're going to practice moving from a four-legged table to a three-legged table by simply picking up your non-dominant arm, which in Eric's case is left. Eric aspires to lift that left arm without anything else shifting or moving. For instance, he will be tempted to shift more body weight to the right side, but he's going to work to avoid that temptation. Any other three-legged table would fall over, but not Eric, because he is using his core muscles to compensate for that fourth leg. Next, we're going to progress this exercise by extending the arm long above your head. So as you lift, nothing moves, nothing shifts, and we'll take the arm long and above your head. Try this a couple of times, alternating arms. And you can see that it is actually quite difficult to avoid shifting from side to side. Now, let's re-establish that good four-legged table, and let's try extending your non-dominant leg. This will be Eric's left leg behind you. Here, the temptation to lean into the opposite hip will be very strong. Set strong and evenly through the upper body and try not to lean into the right shoulder. Double check that your left hip has remained strong on top of the knee. Exactly. The hip is facing down. Now, experiment with moving the right hip even more to the left and try to summon the muscle strength from your core to facilitate that shift. You can tell nothing is moving and nothing is shifting. The best way to get to a strong plank is to master this fundamental. To challenge yourself and to progress this bird dog plank, we're going to hold for longer periods of time. The next progression is to lift the left arm and the right leg at the same time. Here, we've gone from a four-legged table to a two-legged table. So you really need to work to find the balance and make sure that your core is splitting the difference between that two-legged table. Other challenges to add is to put something heavy in your left hand. And that way you can feel some asymmetry and some weight in the asymmetry as you practice the bird dog here. Here, Eric has a very heavy weight that is going to try to tip him over, but his core muscles are going to prevent that from happening. The next progression is to go for left arm and right leg, and simultaneously we're going to take the right leg farther to the right and the left arm farther to the left. And here we've taken the legs of the table away from the midline, so you really have to feel those core muscles keeping you balanced and making sure that you're not rocking too much body weight into your arm or into the leg that is down on the floor. For another terrific challenge, you can try this exercise while elevated. so that your shins and your feet are unsupported. You can do this simply by lifting them, or if you have an ottoman or a small table to practice on, you'll see how much work that bottom, shin, and foot actually do during this exercise. Challenging, super challenging. The other thing to remember is as you're doing these moving challenges and these balance challenges, it is okay to feel shaky. It's okay to occasionally have to put the arm down or put the leg down or to make adjustments on the fly. You want to make sure that your abs and your core are really adapting to each of the movements. Really try to challenge yourself and find the balance. Find where that core is really firing the most effectively. Terrific. Now, if your wrists are feeling okay and your shoulders are feeling okay and you feel like you're ready to progress on from this bird dog position, we can add stepping on your feet. So what we'll do is we've got Eric in his perfect bird dog here, and he's going to keep his shoulders exactly on top of his wrists. And what he'll do is he's going to step back onto the right foot, and then his left foot is going to meet his right foot. He's going to feel the balance here. He's going to feel those core muscles firing. His abs are engaged. Every muscle is engaged. His butt muscles are engaged. Then he'll set his right knee back down and his left knee back down. He might rest here for a second before he moves on to the next set. We'll take a step with his left foot and then a step with his right foot, and he will feel the core firing in this position as well. Next, he'll take his left knee down and his right knee down. Now, another way that you can practice your plank and progress from the bird dog is to bring your forearms down towards the floor. Now, we're going to use a lot of the basics from the bird dog, but some we're going to adjust slightly. Now, just like with the bird dog, you'll feel highly tempted to jut your chin forward because you feel like the floor is so much closer to your face. It may seem like this neck position is easier, but I promise you, your head will be lighter and your upper body will be better positioned if you bring your eyes down and rooster neck in. Next, we're going to put your shoulders exactly on top of your elbows, not too far forward, which will feel too much like arm work, and not too far backward. Terrific. Unlike the bird dog, we are going to ask Eric here to engage his glute muscles and to tuck his tailbone a little bit more than we normally would. This means that his lumbar will be a little more flat than his natural curve of his lumbar. This will help him to engage his abs as strongly as possible and will be especially helpful if you feel any lower back tension at all in this position. Really feel like you're drawing your navel in and a little bit up into your rib cage. Super. So we'll ask Eric to stand on his feet, send one leg out, that's it, find a good home for your toes, and send the other foot out. This is perfect. Now typically we want your feet to be about hip distance apart. If you separate your feet a little farther from each other, it may be a little bit easier as you have a stronger base of support, a wider base of support. If you would like to challenge yourself a little further, go ahead and bring your feet side by side. And here you should really feel the power consolidating through the midline. And again, every muscle is firing. We're going to ask Eric to tuck his tailbone under and to round his lower back a little bit. Now we're going to give Eric a little bit of a break while we talk about where to put his pelvis. In the bird dog exercise with the knees down, the height of your hips from the floor is defined by the length of your femur. Now that the knee isn't down, you have to find where to put your butt and your pelvis in space on your own. We want to find a spot that's not too low and not too high that will maximize the utilization of your core strength. Even with your tailbone tucked under, if you let your pelvis dip too low to the floor, your back will definitely be barking at you. Please try to avoid that at all costs. Additionally, if your pelvis is too high, then you are probably powering through shoulder strength instead of relying on your maximum core strength. So here, you want to think about being in a straight line, and typically that means that your butt will be a little bit higher than you think it will be. So, some progressions for the forearm plank. Okay, we'll set up the perfect forearm plank here, and Eric will come onto his feet. He's nice and set, and he's feeling his core engaged. To first challenge himself, he's going to take a big step to the right with the right foot, and then a big step to the left with the left foot. Exactly. And here you can tell he's going from a four-legged table to a three-legged table, and he's leaving the midline, which is going to make it a little more challenging. Now he's going to take a step with the right foot and step on it, and then a step with the left foot and step on it, and then come back with the right foot and back with the left foot. And then he can practice that to the left as well, stepping first left and then right. Let's let him rest here for a second if he needs to, but he doesn't need to because he has a super strong plank. The next progression we'll talk about is coming from forearms to hands. So we're setting up the perfect plank here on his forearms. He's going to take a deep inhale, and on the exhale, he's going to come up onto his right palm and then his left palm, and return to his right forearm and then his left forearm. Let's try the left as well. Inhale and exhale hard to press up, and bring it all the way down. Fantastic. So the way that Eric kind of cools down here, it should be a pretty hard exercise. Gravity is heavy. It's hard to hold your body weight up. You might really feel tired here. Is he's going to sit down towards his heels, and he's going to take his hands out in front of him, and he's going to drop his forehead down to the floor. Now this looks like a nice, cozy, restful position, but we really want him to feel like he is finding the difference between his butt going in one direction to his heels and his fingertips and the crown of his head going in the other direction here. He's taking a couple of deep breaths here. Inhale and exhale. He's filling up his lungs and sending his ribs up towards the ceiling, and you can tell he's in a nice, round, lengthened spinal position. So if he had any back tension while he was going through some of these exercises, he's really releasing that now. So he's going to walk his hands in and roll all the way up. Kind of let the blood drain out of your head here for a second. He'll go for a couple of shoulder circles and maybe do some of those wrist exercises. And he's going to get excited to practice all of these planks today so that he can impress his friends and fundraise for this fantastic cause. Terrific. Thanks so much for your attention. Happy planking!